The Allies got the initiative again, and more chits again, 4-2. I'm on a tether right now, so I can't really walk over there. Inglesby was my selected pick so that I could pull back and dress the line. I've got to leave this guy up here because he's engaged. He can't. It was either withdraw him or form a solid line or rally or a lot of different other options. The line, by not moving these guys, and I'm going to put a little marker there, and I'm going to shift Inglesby down this way just to indicate better. Those are unused units that'll be out of command, that are out of command because they couldn't move. There was a separation in the line. Lumley's foot slams into here. Again, mixed results. A couple of routed French, routed Dutch, and then the Dutch hitting the Cav as well. Chose not to withdraw, chose to stand and fire. And again, you know, both sides bloodied by it. The French get very effective artillery fire all across the line, routing more of the Brits down here. Over here in the center, where there's now a threat of a French attack, this line's getting very thin. The one thing, though, is Orkney can just take a rear phase and rally. He's got a lot of damaged units. That's going to happen. And then down here, disrupting these again forcing Schultz to make that hard choice of do you press the attack when you're in trouble, or do you just keep reforming? Right now, my gut's saying take things as cautious as possible with the Allies. We had one big failure, we can't afford another one. Kind of impressive. On the last Chitta play, the English did rallies with Wardenberg and Schultz, so not much happening there. The French have Grimaldi. They did an assault to get rid of the one unit that was sitting here. March forward, this guy came forward, hit him, drives him back with a rout, follows him, engages in a second round of fire combat with this one. Remember, there's 2 rounds of fire combat. You're allowed to advance if you drive a unit out, and I think you get to keep the combat going against either that unit or another unit, but in this case, I've got to exchange fire with this. This is going to fire at me if I move in there, using reaction fire. Which routs the French unit, and the Brits are disordered there. You can see kind of, you know, just a mess happening there, but a little bit of excitement. After some diddling about moving lines forward, I don't think this moved yet, up here with the infantry, and attempts to try to launch an attack here that didn't go through, whatever. Spar continuing his oblique into position. Maffei launched, he was already engaged, but he launched his carousel against the line of infantry here, and 2 of his frontline units went, but one of the Dutch units also broke. Not a great result for him. Looked like he had the edge there, but everything was disordered, so it's hard to tell. I mean, everything's ready to rout, basically, in that status. Well, this may be the whole game here. Ransu's Cavs pushed forward and took the safe route up into place. At this point, Marcin has just succeeded in a roll, and he's going to launch a carousel against them, try to weaken them. This could be where things break open, basically, one way or the other. If the French win this, I think it's going to be serious problems. But I look at the numbers here, look at the pact, but the pact situation does not favor the Allies, because if they get driven back, it weakens the whole thing, and could end up in an interesting situation if the French get the first shot to go and hit again. We'll see. The reason this is not good for the Allies is having to make the charge reaction rolls. 3 of the Cav, the infantry's fine, but 3 of the, they had to check too, but 3 of the Cav end up getting only half fire coming in, and then this one actually blew its fire. How likely is that? Well, there's a +2 for anything except Anglo-Dutch Cav. Uh-oh, this guy gets full fire. Yeah, that's Dutch, as is this. Never mind. The Anglo-Dutch actually have this advantage, so this is about the only way they can do a fire phase is if they're charged, because they do the full tilt charge. They might get the counter charge, but actually this works out pretty well for them. The Danish cav, though, is going to have trouble. Okay, well, hitting better cav isn't a good thing. But it is still to their advantage to have struck first. A little bit of disruption here, but for the most part it's the French cav that took the hit. Doesn't look like it's going to be the decisive point in the battle that I kind of thought it might be. I think we're pretty close to done. I'm looking to see, we got this unit, which I don't think I want to do anything with, because I don't want to screen my guns. Those guns are actually performing... See, here's the thing. I'm not sure I really am that impressed with the role they're performing right now. If I put pressure on all sides, I could just break the Anglo-Dutch line there. But, on the other hand, I could break the French line the same way. Oh, boy. See, I've got the clear advantage here, and then I can turn the flank. I would rather wait. There's plenty of time in the battlefield. I don't have to finish it up here. Alright, so out of command. Both sides have done okay with the rallies. Also, both sides have chosen not to rally things that are kind of dangerous, like right here. The French are hoping they can get those rallied before the strike. Likewise, the English here, figuring that actually will hold better. It'll be more likely to hold as a formation if I don't try to rally it. I did have to try to rally one. We have some losses here. Some big points. 8 points. That puts us up to 29. And let's see, this is an R. And this is a cannon, which is not a regimental gun, so it's probably a normal one. I'll check the strategic movement. Generally, it's easier to do that at the beginning of the next turn. Just fudge a little bit. It looks like I ended last turn not completely. Some units were not routed as far as I think they should have been, so I pushed the routes over here another movement because it looks obvious that I forgot that. Anyway, the picks for this turn, once again, big advantage for the Allies in terms of that, but how much of an advantage is it actually? That's hard to tell. I had a lot of trouble picking the 6 that I wanted. I threw an artillery in there actually because, well, a couple of reasons. One, I've got some guns here that are going to help pound those Spaniards and the Archbishop's troops. But also, I felt like I was picking things I didn't even really want to pick anymore. Just throwing commands in the chit cup that I don't necessarily want going early. For the French, very few commands. The artillery went in there. Not so much for this side as for the couple of guns here. They seem to actually serve a direct purpose. And then, as the pick that I actually took, because they won the initiative, Marcin, who activated his cav and rallied a couple of units in the center, try to provide a little bit more resilience in case this huge squad of cav, well, I mean, almost the entire left flank is cav at this point, goes slamming into them and drives them away. I'm counting on it beating them away, and I kind of am lacking any kind of reserve there. Of course, the Anglo-Dutch are stretched thin as well, with nothing to protect this side. But that was really the big question, was did I want to use Grimaldi and send him forward into there? Anyway, here we go into the regular limb orders phase with a big pop. I was making errors all over the place. I accidentally dumped. These 2 cannon were supposed to be up here. One of them routed back with this one. The other one accidentally got dumped in the dead pile. Neither of those should have happened. They should still be here. Anyway, the Anglo-Dutch got their artillery fire chit Open fire, the howitzers back here, etc. Not much there. A little bit of shaking up here. And then these guns, actually, I think I can get a shot in here that I didn't take. 2, 3, 4, 5. That's in a swamp. So it'll be DCT, down 1 for swamp, down 1 for heavier range. Just to take the fire. This is a D-2. The unit's got a +1. So it's a D-1, 8. That's going to disorder it. Now, the 9 would have caused a casualty and a rout, and that's the kind of effects we see here. I think that's out of Fields of Glory rather than the original famous victory, but I can't be absolutely certain anymore. I'm probably playing some bastardized rules somewhere in between the two. Wayne's line up here made an advance contacting with Santini. Essentially, the Dutch troops with the regimental artillery attached to them had all the advantages. Minor advantage. But in the actual result, we've got 2 disorders for the French, 1 for the Dutch, and a rout for the Dutch. Bad die rolls across the line. Basically, they had a column shift forward on the first fire. Second fire is even, and then I could have launched a shock attack here at even. But why bother? I mean, really. The only reason to bother is that there might be a shock attack performed by this unit, but I moved up a British unit onto the line there just to help provide some sort of consolidated defense across there. Of course, now with a hole here, we're going to be able to gang up on this unit if need be, but then there'll be an attack coming in here too. So, I don't know. Holtz finally got off his attack in good order, and he's promptly routed from there. The canister, the line against denser formations that were intending to shock, it just broke it up pretty easily. We got 1 unit up there. I can't shock against 2 units with the defensive bonus of the village, so we'll be standing there and getting withered away. No question there. Artillery pick successfully kind of beats up on the line here. Some effect down here. Holstein Beck took a tiny force, turned smacked into the flank of these guys. Now, flank attacks don't generally really happen because I'm immediately able to turn the units that were faced, but broke the initial unit that I was facing and managed to hit both the initial unit as it routed away and then also this unit. And you can see the initial unit, a couple of good French cav, very good, that's the King's Guard, were destroyed, and also routing some others. So we're really picking into the cav here, and we still haven't launched anything from the major Anglo-Dutch, Danish combined humongous cav unit that's sort of formed there. And just for good measure, we're still not using it. We did a little tiny rally. Couldn't get this unit down here, even though it's right next to the leader. It's not part of the line. It's not connected to it. I'm not sure rallying was the best move. Maybe I should have just moved a unit or 2 up. But some of the frontline units were not in the best shape. Plus, I'm not aligned properly with this. So I really needed, I feel like I needed to take a little bit of time to form up and try to control this thing. But, you know, it's this huge force that's just not coming into play while Holstein Beck slammed into the flank of it and, you know, did a lot of damage with very... The No Limbs was seeing a bunch of nothing, you know, just some rallying or failed attempts to charge forward. Until Guiscard, he made his roll, and man, he charged against everything. And you can see he pummeled his way against Württemberg's cav, driving some of them back. Also hitting Schultz's forces, most especially the Prussians took a couple of losses. We still see the French taking more losses point-wise than the English, which is interesting. I don't know how much more is left. It's an English pick. I don't know if they have anything left. The French should still have a couple. Got up here in this kind of key location, but if I march from there, now there's weakness showing in the Allied line, but we had Orkney rally. That weakness isn't all that weak, and being able to pummel it back further with artillery, maybe get me a little bit of extra grasp on these pieces here so that I can swing in, and then maybe get an outflank on Orkney's line before I charge forward. It's not like the Spaniards are moving forward against the guns or anything where I'd really have to. And that actually looks like everybody. So I think we're on to the out of command units. Actually, Santini had a possibility, but he failed his check to do anything. He wanted to launch an attack coming in there. He didn't get it. He only has a 2 in 10 chance. Looks like we hit the 5 p.m. turn. Points. Lots of routed stuff for the Allies went off the line here. 7, 17, 22, 24 points for the Allies. That puts them up to 53. And 26 for the French. The fact that the French are losing cav is a big deal here. The fact that the Allies are mainly losing infantry is why, even though they're taking, substantially the same losses in a lot of ways, but the Allied cav is doing a better job. The French infantry is doing a better job right now. Or that's what it seems like. All right. Funny factor, the shock value of a unit, the strength point value. That's what you're paying for in victory points, essentially. Everything's got at least 4 that's infantry. Cav is a little bit more. Cav, the shock value, that number actually means something with Cav, at least if they're pulling out their pistols, or if they're not. But for infantry, it doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot except victory points. What really matters there is what's your morale number, because that's what's going to affect things. So any size unit is pretty much equally good, and those big units, like the big British units with the 7 points, well, they're a little better at throwing shock when they first hit. For example, if they're hitting, a solid line of these versus a solid line of the normal French units, these guys all have 2-to-1 odds on the turn they're moving, and 1-to-1 odds if they're standing still. So they're kind of cool for that, and just been having trouble deploying them with their bayonets fixed, charging forward. That has not been terribly effective for me so far. Again, the Allies got more picks than the French by a little bit, and they won the initiative this time. Württemberg went first, slams into mainly the infantry, but a little bit in the cav here. And you can see, as usual, kind of mixed results. A couple of the Anglo-Dutch army's cav have been pushed back, but we also punched some holes and gained some ground. The idea here is to soften things up. I'm planning to hit with Schultz. We'll see what we can get. The guns are screened largely, so I'm kind of hoping to gain some traction there that I wasn't getting before. Ramillies infantry here does a quick follow-up, smashing into a number of places. You can see some of the units. This, I think, is part of the cav, yeah. Some of the infantry got routed on their side, but they also did some damage to the French position as well, for whatever that's worth. These horses actually came through unscathed. They were already disordered. They were attacked by 2 separate units. They did a pretty heroic job of standing there. Because sometimes your action comes just a little too late to do anything for it. General A just went. Everything looks fine now, but he had to rally just about everything after being hit. Some units routing through had caused some real problems. Now, it means next turn he'll be, in effective shape, but it kind of wastes the limb this turn. He put one of them in there because he was intending on hitting, and yes, it sort of did some of the effect standing there and taking it, but he was planning on hitting Lumley, trying to drive him further in. I don't remember what my other action is. I think it's actually down here with Giscard. but it might have, well, I can actually check. No, it's not Mefe. It's got to be Giscard. This guy's an interesting choice, too. Just not enough picks for the French, but when you don't get it in time, it feels kind of like, geez, I didn't need that. If I was just going to rally, I could have used that pick for something else, because I'll get a chance to rally no matter what. After the English get an artillery barrage, which has some effect. That's actually what we were talking about before, where we broke. No, we broke these guys. Yeah, these guys got broken up a little bit. Some fire here hit Grimaldi's force and pretty much made it so that it's not in a position to advance. Then Giscard got his action, and he decided to charge, and that actually pretty much disorganized his command. Not so much with the units, you can see a lot of them are disorganized, but also with location. He's got some of his infantry way up here. He just no longer has a unified command, a unit down here. He made some inroads, which is quite often how your command gets disorganized, is you break through in some places. If I recall correctly, but it's been 20 years since I played it, the old Great Battles of Alexander, which is up there. I actually have the old one, which it's not my copy I played. I picked that up cheaply. I think that had where you had to keep your lines kind of together, and they fell apart in this way, but I don't recall that absolutely. I know that I felt like that was kind of missing in SPQR, was this kind of disorganization as units advance in different directions. We got one last chip in here, which is Sergeant Schultz. Oh God, I don't know what he's gonna do. He's gonna rally. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, he's gonna rally. There's some largely unimportant actions, rallies and such not. Santini strikes here against really what's sort of the wedge point between Oyen and Orkney. Kind of breaks through. You can see a bunch of the Danes and I think these are Hanoverians are running, kind of breaking up the formation. Now, of course, like any assault, his own units are not in great shape afterwards. It's kind of a neat. I like the flow of that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it historically works out, but not because the units are breaking up as they're charging. Just the actual mechanisms, the actual die rolls on the charts, the way it all works together. I'm feeling like I'm getting what don't absolutely feel like accurate results, but it's an interesting story all the same, which may be enough for me. I'm not sure. Anyway, then after Holstein-Beck moves into position to threaten Marcin's forces here, we see both the two cav fail to get activations, but a pull forward in the French center, rallying here with the Spaniards, preparing to strike as this is getting weaker and weaker. It seems like this angle here is really where the fight's, well, maybe going to be decided, at least on this side. Over here, we got us, this is already heavily engaged and going pretty heavily. Can't get anything going over here. So now we do the out of command stuff. And we push our way to the 5:30 turn. Not a lot's changed, obviously, in the rally phase. We've got some units, continuing their route. I kind of screwed up with Oyen. I forgot to activate him, so I kind of took advantage of that, and he managed to rally some of the rear line units that I think could have been under his command. One unit died here for 6 points, and that is an R, so it goes over here. And we'll see. This could be looking at the decisive point in the game right now, I think. Alrighty, start of this new 5:30 turn. I gotta be careful, I have an interview very shortly. Just a screening call, but the French ended up with the larger chit ball pick with 5. Nobody knows that of their opponent, though. And that's going to allow them... They actually were at the point where they were having trouble finding a 5th pull. Considering putting the arty in, but since they're mainly on the offensive right now, it doesn't do them much good. It would just eat up an activity. I got something to say about the arty in a moment. For the Brits, they won the initiative, though, and they picked up... They're going to use the Schultz counter to try to launch an attack against Guiscard's forces and try to take that village. Or at least wreck the advance that's been going on. As to the artillery, I looked in the Fields of Glory rules. That has 2 artillery limbs. Those are the rules I'm mostly referring to now, but I haven't read fully yet. That has 2, or even settled down to try to do so at all, really. That has 2 artillery limbs in it. And with your limb picks, you're allowed to pick either an artillery, as you can in this game, or you can pick 2 artillery and do nothing else, where you're just pumping fire constantly. Boy, that's a nice defensive option. I could definitely see that being used here. Of course, it's feeling to me like the defender has pretty good advantages. Maybe not as strong as in some games, but because there's an advantage to attacking in the sense of having the momentum on your side when you hit someone. You get the shift, at least for the first round of combat, but then as you go on, if you're the one picking the assault picks, when units are engaged, you're actually at a slight disadvantage, which is more normal, giving the advantage to the defender in combat. Since fire is simultaneous, there really is very little against attacking. Cav charges, they require a reaction. I mean, there's just a lot of things. Although the reaction's not terrible, it can reduce the amount of firepower the defender's able to put out. So there's a lot of things in the advantage of the attacker here. But what I'm finding is, in both battles, it feels like the guy who's been tactically on the defense actually is able to do fairly well. I'm not sure quite why yet. I feel like there's either something wrong with the system or something wrong with me playing it, understanding the rules, whatever, or my die rolls have been off, which seems like a bit much to say. It just seems odd that both battles have been going in the French's favor. Significantly, actually. Schultz does a pretty good job smashing his way through some of those units. You can see he took a couple of routes. And we also have some losses over here. But, at least we're gaining some ground. Of course, that now brings the artillery up into play, which, depending on the situation, could be a real problem. But we're hoping to kind of clear that flank and be able to win on at least one of the 2 flanks. And this one, well, if the French can't advance, if those guns do anything against them significant, it'll be kind of a problem for them as well. English artillery fires down the line. Not much effect there. In a disorder over here, I don't know. And then Lumley charged forward and kind of pushed these guys back, but some bad results, including routing through a disordered unit, which caused it to rout and then take losses because it didn't have enough movement points, and caused a lot of disorganization over here in that section of the board. The Cav withdrew away from an infantry attack, and, well, his formation's still largely together other than these routing units, but he could have taken time to reorganize. Basically, if you hit with a force that's not in fully great shape, even though the units were largely in pretty good shape, it's harder to have much effect. But he routed a couple of French units to boot, so it came out kind of a wash, and he may be buying himself time with that attack. Infantry up here rallied. I might not have wanted to do that, except that, like in Great Battles of History, one of your goals in this game is to avoid losing by having your army break. So rallying is one way of keeping yourself from falling behind. And with a couple of routed units, even though I might have had a good opportunity, most of my units were in good form here before, I might have had a nice opportunity to press the attack against Lumley. There's a strong incentive to prevent that rout from costing me. So there's always this balance. Do I want to hurt the other guy, or do I want to make sure I save myself? And, you know, especially in these cases, an attack may give you some advantage, but it's not an overall advantage. It's not a guarantee. It's not like I get to shoot and he doesn't, or I get to rally. It's I get to engage him in close combat, you know, at least close enough that we're in firing range. Or I can rally my units. Unless I have an overwhelming advantage, it's probably worthwhile to prevent your units from routing off the board, because there's a chance you'll be paying for it. Then over here, Marcin launched his cav assault, and you can see kind of mixed results as usual. Some hits down here against some of the Dutch cav. There was a counter charge here, which kind of disrupted both sides. Success here largely, but one of our units was routed off. You know, every time you hit, it's not a pleasant thing. And you know, when you compare it to Great Battles of American Civil War, the old version of that, or CWB or something, where each person's taking their turn and they move their pieces and they fire, they want to make their moves to get into the better position for firing. They want to take their fire. Here, though, what you do gets mixed in and mixed up together, in the sense that it's almost like taking a slice of the Igo-Yugo system in time and taking a whole turn, and any given action is immediately visible over that whole turn. So moving closer, hey, I've got the overall advantage here. Well, do you overall get repulsed or not? And it feels a little bit more random, as does Great Battles of History and a number of other these systems that are more interactive. That interleaving, I don't know, I feel less assured I'm making a good attack here, even if I have the numbers or whatever. Because quite often, you know, I find out that, yeah, well, I'm the one who lost that engagement, even though I thought I had the advantage, which I like that. I definitely like that aspect. Almost entirely inconclusive attack by Santini. Some disorders. This unit here is outside his command. He had to charge up with most of the rest of the units. There was one over here that was already. And then Costa over here, well, again, making that choice of I had a routed unit that I could repair rather than advance. The advance wouldn't have even allowed an engagement. I have a lot of fresh troops, but I'd be going up against the guns, and I'm not thrilled with that. Now to the last shit, which is good old Grimaldi, who is over here, and he looks like he's in pretty good shape. Not much in the way of an advance, though, that I could make. I could only attack one unit, so I'm probably going to move him, trying to get a position on that town. After a little bit of piddling around, which included Oyen, for example, declaring this as his line so he could rally it, for the same reasons as before. Now, Orkney can stretch his line all the way out here. We got Spar having positioned himself forward, using an auto move. Oyen's sort of natural line might be up here. He's too far away to take command of that, though, so that's automatically out of command. He could have commanded this one and launched an attack with one unit, or tried to take some part of this and done something with it, God knows what. It seemed more reasonable to handle that. But then Maffei, or whatever, launched his cav on an attack here. Largely ineffectual. A couple of his units routing away. This one disordered up here. That was really the front that he was able to engage with. So the French attack there failed. My hope had been to break a hole here So that Guiscard, who took a rally action, can't do anything about these guys unless he ignored the main force of his line. But now, after having used Guiscard, a couple of his infantry, or no, these are cav, but a couple of his infantry got disordered by those cav running through. So part of his rallying function was kind of useless, except that he had disordered infantry back there backing the cav that, might have routed or taken damage. One of those had the cav routed through it, so overall probably okay that he did that rally. So the French ran out of actions because they had so many CPs played early on, and then the English spent the rest of the limbs phase looking for the no limbs phase looking for an action. I ran through the rest of their commands, Holstein, Beck, Runzu, Ingleby, trying to roll for an action. In each case, I wanted to make an attack, either against the cav here, and also this way, or against the French position itself. Nothing came out from it. Even Orkney tried to launch an attack to try to drive these back. Still, nothing came of it. All right, now to the out of command shit. Made some choices, especially on the Allied side, not to rally units. Now this one actually I think made an attempt. They ran, but they're still in command, so now I can do a rally action with the commander and fix them without any danger. For the French, I more or less had to make chances because the units were running away anyway. Total losses here, 13 points for the French, 11 for the Allies. Still leaving the French in the lead in terms of losses. I'm not sure. There are no real rules for what happens, I think, if the game makes it to the end. I guess you can kind of compare these like you would in Great Battles of History and come up with some sort of, indicator of who wins this draw. But the real goal in this is to break the enemy army, either through the terrain, grabbing the terrain, forcing them to withdraw, or actually smack them down so hard that you get the army rout results. Every now and then my pieces get a mind of their own in this case, and I'm surprised that my games are in as good a condition as they are. This cav ended up somehow near my garbage in the kitchen. It's always terrifying. It must have stuck to my arm or something, or maybe fallen on the floor and gotten to my foot. Anyway, I don't know where it came from. I put it in the dead pile at no cost. But I have absolutely no idea because there's no unit commands or anything like that. Anyway, new turn. The French line is actually being stressed in a way that maybe wasn't obvious to me, and now I'm beginning to realize, oh crap, I don't have anyone who can command this general. Now, I could slide Villeroy over if I wanted to launch an attack there, but I've chosen not to. My picks, well, this area over here, the French are looking particularly weakened. This is where they've been launching their attack. And it's hard to recover from it. Once you're engaged, I could do a shootout. And I think I gave Santini a command in order to try to do that. But he looks like he's more on the verge of collapse than the Allied wing. Now, it could be that essentially Oyon's already collapsed here. And that may be, I'm hitting fresher troops under Orkney. But I need to get that resolved for the French, and then so that I can rally those forces. Likewise, same kind of problem for Marcin. However, I really wanted to launch an attack from this direction, and I don't know who my third pick was. I'm afraid it was Maffei, who doesn't look too solid. But by putting 2 units up against Lumley here, I may be able to break through. The Allies got a very bad chit for them. The worst chit they can, a 2. That means I have 2 4s, that's all I have. Okay. that means they didn't get many picks. They won the initiative, so the artillery's going to be the pick. And their other pick, I think, is actually Spar's unit to cut across here. Again, both sides don't know what the other side's choosing here, except for the artillery. One thing I was thinking about, I went on a nice walk, that I knew something was missing in the game, and I kind of realized what it is. There's no squares. I guess they're kind of handled abstractly, but and it makes some sense. Maybe the unit size is such that you wouldn't form a square with that size. Maybe that's one of the complaints I heard with musket and pike. But to tell you the truth, if there's not sort of that infantry is kind of frozen in place by the threat of cavalry, infantry's not at particular risk by artillery, it starts feeling less like a game of this period. I'm not saying the systems in musket and pike or 7 Years' War, either of them apply. This is somewhere in between. Yet still, squares were a standard operating procedure against cavalry. They're the way of stopping the cav from dominating the infantry line, from breaking these thinner lines especially. And I'm not feeling the kind of combined arms nature that warfare throughout this period really has. It has its own special characteristics here, and some of it I do feel. The linear nature as applied by the game, I think, is actually very nicely done. I kind of miss some kind of application of that. A cav threat forcing the infantry into square, allowing the artillery to perform a little better. Now that's not going to happen very often because this artillery is particularly bad at moving. In particular, in this system, it's even worse than in musket and pike, which I think also is an issue. I'm not saying artillery should be flying around all over the place, but it's pretty damn near immobile in this game. Even though they're civilian artillery, they still had the crews with them, and they could move often enough. Artillery opens fire. A little bit of damage over here, but the primary was over here, and then Spar's command line marches in and assaults. And you can see the Spaniards and Germans are not in good shape right now. That's the end of the British limbs, actually. The French screwed up. They should have picked this one. I'm realizing I'm here sitting out here in canister range of this artillery. Now, I'm going to get to recover these units, but I was afraid to launch the attack on that side. I felt like I needed it elsewhere. Bavarian infantry in this area takes a march forward, smacks Lumley around, and actually just kills a couple of his units. There's less disorder when you kill units outright like that cleanly. They're just disappearing as opposed to routing through the enemy's forces. So, some points, some units gone, but less overall effect maybe on the position. Santini had a really good opportunity, which he took into account, to swap units in and out of the front line. That's all he gets to do. He doesn't get to launch the assault or anything. But now he's got a much, much stronger position facing the Anglo-Allied. And we're on the last hit, which is going to be Maffei. I don't know how well this is going to work. I should have taken this instead of Maffei. Anyway, it's just this little cluster right here. And especially after the attacks, there was up here, there was very little that these guys could accomplish. They did a 1 hex move forward, which they could have done without even a command roll. No engagement. Total waste. The no limbs phase, after a little bit of nothing really, some rallying, etc. Over here we're seeing those forces coming back together. Costas moves forward, And then Orkney gets an activation and slams in hard. Now, as is so often the case, attacking in this game does not work quite as well as you might hope it does. The French haven't really been too badly hurt here. Now remember, they did a swap up, so they got better units in the front line before, and those are mostly disordered, but it's the Anglo-Dutch that are routing anywhere from this engagement, so it didn't go well for them. Now the big Cav engagement finally happened. Marcin, I believe, actually made the first strike. It wasn't terribly effective. And then Ranzu, boom, in there with the heavy charging Anglo-Dutch Cav, just shattered the French Cav force. And I don't know how recoverable that is. It looks pretty ugly right now. I've been waiting to get this humongous Anglo-Dutch Cav into play. You can see only a portion of it actually engaged, but that was sufficient to drive what was left of Marcin's kind of... He had units back here that he could play with. But on the other hand, losing a couple of Danish Cav, there's more points. The guy who's making the advances on the terrain isn't necessarily the one who's got the advantage. The only thing I have left is Inglesby. I'm not sure what to do. I'm going to roll for an action on him. If I get it, then I have to think real hard. Otherwise, though, I have no idea whether I actually want to launch that attack or not. As we push into the 6:30 turn, a lot of rallying went on. Some failures, too, though. You can see some of these forces here. The whole doesn't look as obvious anymore now with the French having rallied kind of the main of it. But what's kind of interesting here is Ranzu actually could command from here all the way through all of these, as long as Holstein Beck just takes this little tiny sliver over here as his command. So that opens up an opportunity to just keep this giant Cav force moving forward and pressing on, and most of it's in pretty good order. You can see we rallied these guys that were up there, took a shot on them basically, because that'll help me keep a momentum going. Let's see what our points are. 6, 12, 13, 18, 24. To 12, 17. Close. Definitely close. Alright, this one's going up. I don't think this battle's going to end before it gets to the end time period. Being a lot more cautious in play, and that's keeping the units alive longer, just getting kind of a feel for it. I still don't really understand how to be terribly effective, but I understand how not to lose, kind of.